The heat shimmered above the asphalt of Interstate 40 as state troopers approached the abandoned silver Volvo. Its driver's door hung slightly ajar, keys still in the ignition. A half-empty coffee cup rested in the console, long gone cold. The car belonged to Miles Godfrey, and this lonely rest stop would become the epicenter of one of the most baffling disappearances in recent North Carolina history. Miles Godfrey wasn't just anyone. At 53, the former criminology professor had built a reputation for solving cases others couldn't, or wouldn't. His salt and pepper hair and piercing gray eyes had become familiar to viewers of true crime documentaries, where his methodical analysis cut through sensationalism with surgical precision. 3 years ago, he'd walked away from academic tenure to start his own investigative firm, focusing primarily on cold cases and allegations of police misconduct. Miles wouldn't just vanish, insisted Rebecca Godfrey, his wife of 22 years, her hands trembling around a mug of untouched tea in their Durham home. Something happened to him. Someone made him disappear. The timeline haunted investigators from the start. On September 18, 2015, Miles had driven west from Durham toward the small town of Marion in McDowell County. He'd told Rebecca he was meeting a source, someone with information about a series of unsolved murders dating back to the early 2000s that he believed were connected. These killings formed the backbone of his new documentary project, tentatively titled, Buried Truth, The Forgotten Dead of Appalachia. His last confirmed communication had been a text to Rebecca at 3:47 p.m., meeting running late. Might stay overnight. Don't wait up. Cell tower data placed his phone near Marion at that time, but the device had been powered off shortly afterward. His credit cards hadn't been used since a gas station purchase earlier that day. His car was discovered 36 hours later, approximately 60 miles from Marion, headed back toward Durham. The timing doesn't make sense, said Detective Hannah Reeves, who led the initial investigation. She stood beside the Volvo, now impounded at the State Bureau of Investigation headquarters in Raleigh. If he was meeting someone in Marion, why was his car found heading east, but only halfway back to Durham? And why stop at a rest area when he still had 3/4 of a tank of gas? The inside of Miles's vehicle revealed little. His laptop was missing, but his overnight bag remained in the trunk, untouched. A notebook found in the glove compartment contained cryptic notes, Sheriff J.D., 2003 to 2011 pattern, and whistleblower, credible but scared. The whistleblower reference aligned with what little Rebecca knew about Miles's final project. He had mentioned interviewing someone from within the McDowell County Sheriff's Department, someone who claimed to have information about evidence being mishandled in multiple homicide investigations. Miles believed these cases weren't just unsolved, they were deliberately buried, Rebecca explained, her academic background and research methodology evident in her precise speech. He thought certain powerful people didn't want these murders solved. Sheriff James Dennison of McDowell County publicly denied any knowledge of Miles's visit. Mr. Godfrey never contacted our department officially, he told reporters a week after the disappearance. If he had concerns about our handling of cases, there are proper channels for that. But Lydia Morgan, a retired dispatcher from the department, contradicted the sheriff's statement. Miles was here that day, she claimed in an anonymous tip that was later traced back to her. I saw him in the parking lot talking to Deputy Carver. They both looked intense. Deputy Thomas Carver, when questioned, acknowledged speaking briefly with Godfrey but claimed it was just a casual conversation about general crime statistics for the documentary. He seemed fine when we parted ways, Carver stated. Said he was heading to meet someone else. The investigation expanded when Miles's research assistant, Aidan Wright, came forward with additional information. A former student of Godfrey's at Duke University, Wright had been helping organize interview transcripts and evidence for the documentary. Professor Godfrey had identified a pattern, Wright explained, unfolding a map marked with red pins across the conference table at the Durham Police Department. 7 murders between 2003 and 2011, all initially classified as robberies gone wrong or drug-related killings. But he found connections, similar gunshot patterns, cases where evidence went missing, witnesses who changed statements overnight. Wright hesitated before continuing. The week before he disappeared, the professor received an unmarked envelope. Inside was a police evidence bag containing a shell casing and a note that just said, "Same gun, all 7." He was ecstatic, said it was the physical link that proved his theory. This revelation sparked a new wave of searches. Volunteers combed the areas around the rest stop and along the 60-mile stretch between there and Marion. Cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar were employed to scan for disturbed earth. Digital forensics experts attempted to recover deleted emails and cloud storage data. Nothing substantial emerged until 3 months after Miles vanished, when a hiker found his wallet in a stream nearly 15 miles from the rest stop. The leather was weathered, but his driver's license, credit cards, and a photo of Rebecca remained inside. Peculiarly, exactly $43 in cash was still there, the same amount Miles typically carried for emergencies. "It doesn't make sense as a robbery," Detective Reeves noted. "And if someone wanted to dispose of identification, why leave it where it might eventually be found?" The discovery reignited public interest, but also spawned conflicting theories. Some believed the wallet had been planted to mislead investigators. Others saw it as evidence that Miles had fled his old life, perhaps suffering a psychological break. A small but vocal group online speculated that he had uncovered something so dangerous that he had entered witness protection. Rebecca dismissed these alternatives outright. "Miles wouldn't leave his work unfinished. And he certainly wouldn't leave me wondering if he was dead or alive." Her fierce loyalty never wavered, even as months stretched into a year with no resolution. What the public didn't know was that Rebecca had received a single, anonymous call 6 weeks after Miles disappeared. "Stop looking if you want to stay safe," a distorted voice had warned before disconnecting. The call had been traced to a burner phone purchased with cash at a convenience store in Charlotte. Security footage showed a tall man in a baseball cap buying the phone, but his face remained obscured from the camera's angle. The FBI briefly joined the investigation after this threat, but without more concrete evidence connecting Miles's disappearance to his work, their involvement gradually diminished. Meanwhile, Deputy Thomas Carver's life took unexpected turns. 7 months after Godfrey vanished, Carver resigned from the McDowell County Sheriff's Department, citing personal reasons. 3 weeks later, he purchased a lakefront cabin in Tennessee, a property valued at nearly 3 times his annual salary. When questioned about the purchase, Carver claimed it was inherited money from a distant relative. Financial investigators found a wire transfer that supported his claim, though the origin of the funds proved difficult to trace beyond an LLC registered in Delaware. 2 years after Miles's disappearance, another potential break came from an unexpected quarter. Elijah Santos, a former inmate at Central Prison in Raleigh, contacted Rebecca after his release. He claimed that during his incarceration, he had shared a cell block with a man who boasted about taking care of a nosy professor who didn't know when to quit. "This guy said they didn't kill him right away," Santos told investigators, his hands fidgeting with a paper cup in the interview room. "Said they wanted information first, about what he knew and who else knew it. Said it took 3 days before they finished the job." The alleged confessor had since been transferred to another facility and denied any knowledge of such conversations when questioned. Without corroboration, Santos's information was filed away as another unverifiable lead. As the 3rd anniversary of Miles's disappearance approached, Rebecca Godfrey made a decision. Using her savings and a book advance, she had begun documenting her husband's work and subsequent disappearance. She hired Nadine Trask, a private investigator known for her tenacity in cold cases. Trask approached the case from a different angle, focusing not on Miles's last known movements but on the 7 murders he had been investigating. "To find Miles, we need to find what he found," she reasoned. Something in these old cases frightened someone enough to take action. Her methodology was methodical. She re-interviewed family members of the 7 victims, reviewed court transcripts, and filed dozens of Freedom of Information Act requests for police records. Most crucially, she tracked down former officers who had worked the original cases but since left the department. One such officer, Martin Graves, now owned a security consulting business in Asheville. Those cases were weird from the start, he admitted over coffee with Trask. Standard procedure just didn't happen. Evidence misplaced, interviews conducted without recording, leads not followed up. At the time, I chalked it up to departmental dysfunction, but looking back. He trailed off, staring into his cup. Looking back, what? Trask pressed. Looking back, it was too consistent to be incompetence, Graves finished. But here's what might interest you, all 7 cases passed through Sheriff Dennison's hands, even though he was just a detective for the first 3. Sheriff James Dennison had enjoyed an uncontested re-election in 2016, running on a platform of community safety and traditional values. His campaign had received substantial backing from several local business owners, including timber magnate Howard Klein. Trask discovered that Klein's timber operations had expanded significantly between 2003 and 2011, the exact timeframe of the murders Miles had been investigating. More intriguingly, 6 of the 7 victims had connections to either environmental activism or land disputes involving timber rights. This wasn't about random killings, Trask reported back to Rebecca. This was about land and money. And I think your husband figured that out. What neither woman knew was that Miles had indeed made this connection in the weeks before he disappeared. Among the encrypted files on his cloud storage, which Trask eventually gained access to through digital forensics, was a draft of an article titled, Blood Timber, How Murder Paved the Way for Millions. The draft detailed how strategic killings had removed obstacles to Klein's acquisition of valuable timber land. More explosively, it outlined a financial relationship between Klein and Sheriff Dennison, with evidence suggesting that the sheriff had received percentages of certain land deals disguised as investments in his wife's catering business. For years after Miles vanished, the landscape had changed. Sheriff Dennison announced his retirement, citing health concerns. Howard Klein sold his timber business to a conglomerate and relocated to Arizona. Deputy Carver's Tennessee cabin was found abandoned, with neighbors reporting they hadn't seen him in months. And in the McDowell County Sheriff's Department evidence room, during a mandated inventory, a new sheriff discovered a locked cabinet that hadn't been included in previous audits. Inside were case files for all 7 murders Miles had been investigating, along with a gold watch Rebecca had given Miles on their 20th anniversary. The watch bore no fingerprints, but a microscopic examination revealed trace evidence suggesting it had been stored in soil for an extended period before being cleaned and placed in the cabinet. The soil composition matched samples from a remote area of Pisgah National Forest, prompting a new search operation. As cadaver dogs and search teams combed the dense woodland, Rebecca Godfrey stood at the command post, her face weathered by years of uncertainty. "I don't know if we'll find him today," she told a reporter who had followed the case from the beginning. "But Miles taught me that the truth doesn't stay buried forever. Eventually, it finds its way to the surface." The search continues, as does the investigation. The mystery of what happened to Miles Godfrey, whether he uncovered corruption that cost him his life, whether he was forced into hiding, or whether some other fate befell him, remains unsolved. But with each passing month, more pieces of the puzzle emerge from the shadows, suggesting that Miles was right all along. In those quiet woods where the search teams methodically work their grid patterns, one can almost hear Miles's favorite saying, which Rebecca had engraved on the back of his watch, "Justice delayed is still justice." The dead can wait. For now, the living continue to search, both for Miles Godfrey and for the truth he sacrificed everything to uncover.